Picture this moment. You are in a conversation, a meeting, a dinner, an argument online with someone you thought you trusted, and somewhere in the middle of it, a quiet, devastating realization creeps over you. Not anger, not surprise, something more exhausting than either. The realization that the person across from you is not going to understand. Not because the words are too complex, not because the idea is poorly explained, but because they have already decided what they believe, and no amount of evidence, logic, or patient articulation is going to loosen that certainty by even a single degree. You have been there, I know you have, because if you are the kind of person drawn to a video like this one, you have felt that particular exhaustion more times than you can count. The fatigue that comes not from hard work, but from navigating a world where confident wrongness is rewarded, where depth is treated with suspicion, and where the most vocal voices are rarely the most thoughtful ones. What if I told you that one of the most radical, most penetrating philosophers in the history of human thought spent his entire intellectual life trying to understand exactly this? That Arthur Schopenhauer, a man who lived in deliberate distance from the social world of 19th century Europe, built a philosophy that maps this experience with frightening precision. And more importantly, that buried within his work is a framework for not merely surviving the encounter with stupidity, but transcending it entirely. This video will take you through that framework. We will move from discomfort to clarity, from frustration to something that looks, genuinely, not superficially, like freedom. And I promise you this: the insight waiting at the end of this journey is the one that will change not just how you see other people, but how you see yourself. If this kind of thinking resonates with you, philosophy that actually touches the texture of real life, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit the like button. Share this with someone in your life who carries this quiet, heavy burden. And leave a comment below. Your perspective matters here, and what you write might be exactly what a stranger needs to read tonight. Arthur Schopenhauer was born in 1788 in Danzig, and he spent much of his life being wrong about one specific thing. He believed his contemporaries would recognize his genius immediately. They did not. His landmark work, The World as Will and Representation, published in 1818, sold almost nothing. His lectures at the University of Berlin, which he deliberately scheduled to clash with those of the celebrated Hegel, whom he considered a fraud and an intellectual windbag, were attended by almost no one. Hegel's halls, meanwhile, overflowed. This is not a trivial biographical detail. It shaped everything. Schopenhauer's philosophy was not theorized from a position of social comfort. It was hammered out in the furnace of genuine marginalization, genuine contempt for mainstream thought, and the slow, corrosive recognition that the marketplace of ideas does not trade in truth. It trades in confidence, it trades in volume, it trades in whoever happens to be fashionable. By the time Europe finally caught up with Schopenhauer, near the end of his life in the 1850s, he had developed something extraordinarily rare, a philosophy of human irrationality that had been tested against decades of lived experience. He did not theorize about the limits of reason from an armchair. He watched those limits destroy his career, and then he thought with remarkable clarity about why. His central insight, the one that underlies everything else, is this: human beings are not fundamentally rational. We did not evolve to think clearly. We evolved to survive, to dominate, to reproduce, to belong. Reason exists in most people as an instrument of these deeper drives, not as a governing force. The will, this blind, insatiable, forward-driving force that Schopenhauer saw at the core of all life, does not submit to logic. It recruits logic. It uses logic when useful and discards it when inconvenient. This is the foundation. Everything else follows from here. Before we go further, we need to make a distinction that Schopenhauer considered absolutely critical: the difference between ignorance and stupidity. Ignorance is a gap in knowledge. It is the absence of information, experience, or education about a particular subject. Ignorance, in Schopenhauer's view, is not only correctable, it is natural. Nobody is born knowing anything. The ignorant person who recognizes their ignorance is, in fact, displaying a form of intelligence. They are capable of the most foundational intellectual act, acknowledging a limit. Stupidity is something else entirely. Schopenhauer understood stupidity not as an absence of information, but as a structural resistance to thinking. The stupid person. And here Schopenhauer is not talking about EQ scores or academic achievement. He is talking about a quality of mind, cannot hold contradictory ideas in tension long enough to examine them. They cannot entertain a perspective that does not already confirm what they feel. The moment an idea threatens their self-image, their certainty, their belonging to a particular group or tribe, that idea becomes not just wrong, but offensive, dangerous, personal. This is why stupidity, unlike ignorance, cannot be addressed through education. You cannot teach someone out of stupidity the way you can teach someone out of not knowing the capital of France. Stupidity is not a content problem. It is a structural one. It is the absence of the cognitive and emotional machinery required to process genuine uncertainty, genuine complexity, genuine challenge. And here is the part that makes it genuinely dangerous. Stupidity rarely knows itself. The ignorant person can say, "I don't know." The stupid person rarely can. They have replaced the experience of not knowing with the experience of certainty, and that substitution feels, from the inside, identical to wisdom. Perhaps even more confident than wisdom, because wisdom is haunted by doubt. Stupidity never is. Schopenhauer observed this with the cold precision of a scientist studying a recurring phenomenon. The most harmful actors in any society, he noted, were not the evil ones. Evil, at least, could be understood, predicted, sometimes negotiated with. The most harmful actors were the confidently stupid, the ones who acted with absolute conviction on the basis of reasoning they had never examined, toward ends they had never questioned, with consequences they could neither foresee nor accept responsibility for. Does this ring a bell? Cast your mind back, not to abstract history, to last week, to last month, to the meeting where someone confidently dismantled a well-reasoned proposal with a feeling, to the conversation where facts were met with a louder repetition of the original assertion, to the relationship where your thoughtfulness was reframed, somehow, as the problem. These are not isolated moments. They are a pattern, and understanding that pattern, truly understanding it, at a philosophical rather than just an emotional level, is the first step towards something Schopenhauer considered the only real victory available to an intelligent person: inner sovereignty. Now here is where Schopenhauer's analysis becomes uncomfortable. Not uncomfortable for the people who are the subject of it. Uncomfortable for you. Because the real trap is not stupidity itself. The real trap is what intelligence does when it encounters stupidity. Intelligent people, and by this I mean people who are genuinely capable of examining their own thinking, of tolerating ambiguity, of updating their views when presented with evidence, carry a peculiar and largely invisible vulnerability. They believe, at some fundamental level, that reason is universally accessible. That logic, when applied clearly enough, will eventually land. That if they can only find the right words, the right framing, the right entry point into an argument, the person across from them will follow the same thread they are following and arrive at the same place. This belief is not merely optimistic. It is, Schopenhauer would argue, a category error. It is the mistake of assuming that all minds operate by the same rules. They do not. And the intelligent person who keeps explaining, keeps rephrasing, keeps patiently reassembling their argument in search of the approach that will finally work. That person is not demonstrating virtue. They are demonstrating a failure to understand human nature. And the costs of this failure are not abstract. Think about what happens inside you during one of these exchanges. Think about the slow drain of energy as you sense that your words are not landing. The frustration that builds not into anger, but into a kind of bewildered depletion. The way the conversation continues to circle the same point with the same resolution, and yet you keep pushing, driven by the conviction that one more attempt will be the one that breaks through. Schopenhauer named this pattern with characteristic directness. He called it the intellectual's peculiar form of suffering. Not the dramatic, operatic suffering of loss or grief or betrayal. The grinding, low-level suffering of potential repeatedly colliding with limitation. Of depth repeatedly encountering shallowness and spending itself in the process. And the cruelest part. The more intelligent the person, the more acutely they feel this collision. The more clearly they perceive the gap between what a conversation could be and what it actually is. The shallow mind walks away from a frustrating exchange without particularly noticing it was frustrating. You are the person who sees what they cannot see. Take away their blindness, and you lose your definition. This is the subtle seduction Schopenhauer warned against most urgently, the way that intellectual superiority, if it is not carefully managed, becomes a form of dependence. You need the stupid person to remain stupid, because their stupidity is now doing psychological work for you. It is confirming your identity. It is providing you with a constant supply of evidence that you are different, that you see more clearly, that you are separate from the mediocrity that surrounds you. And in this way, insidiously, gradually, without your quite noticing, their limitation becomes your cage. True intelligence, in Schopenhauer's sense, is not comparative. It does not define itself against anyone else. It does not require an audience of lesser minds to confirm its own existence. It simply is. It does its work. It moves through the world with a kind of quiet self-possession that needs neither validation nor victory. The person who has genuinely integrated this understanding does not feel superiority when they encounter stupidity. They feel something closer to the emotion a competent doctor feels when examining a patient with a chronic condition. Concern, perhaps. Practical assessment. The question of what, if anything, can be usefully done. But not triumph. Not contempt. And not, crucially, any urgent need to make the patient aware of their diagnosis. Before we reach the final and most transformative insight, I want to pause here and ask you something. Think about the people in your life who most consistently drain your energy. When you imagine dealing with them differently, not with explanation, not with argument, not with the attempt to change their minds, what do you feel? Relief? Or does some part of you resist letting go of the struggle? Notice that resistance. It is trying to tell you something about where you currently are and where you might be able to go. We have covered the landscape of the problem in some depth now. We have named stupidity clearly. We have traced its mechanics, its social dynamics, its particular relationship with confidence. We have identified the trap that intelligence falls into, and the further trap of contempt that waits beyond it. Now it is time to talk about what Schopenhauer actually proposed. And his proposal, given how clearly he saw the problem, is surprisingly, almost counterintuitively, gentle. The answer is not withdrawal from the world. It is not isolation, misanthropy, or the construction of a hermetically sealed private reality in which other people simply cannot reach you. Schopenhauer lived in Frankfurt for the last 3 decades of his life, walked his poodle every afternoon through the city's parks, ate at the same restaurant every evening, and engaged readily with the people he encountered there. He was not a recluse. He was something more precise than that. He was a man who had become very deliberate about where he directed his energy. The first principle of his proposed approach is what we might call accurate calibration. Most of the suffering that intelligent people experience in their encounters with stupidity Schopenhauer argued, comes not from the encounters themselves, but from what those people expected the encounters to be. Every time you leave a frustrating conversation, feeling depleted and vaguely betrayed, ask yourself what you were hoping for. Chances are, you were hoping for genuine engagement, for the satisfaction of two minds actually meeting, for the specific pleasure of a point landing and being understood. And when that did not happen, as it often will not, the shortfall between expectation and reality is where the pain lives. The stupidity itself is just a neutral fact. The suffering is the gap. Schopenhauer's solution is not to lower your standards. It is to apply them more accurately. Not every conversation is designed to be an exchange of genuine thinking. Not every relationship contains the architecture required for real intellectual intimacy. Not every argument is a philosophical dialogue waiting to unfold. When you enter each of these situations carrying the expectation of depth, and depth is structurally unavailable, you are setting yourself up for a pain that is entirely self-generated. The calibrated response is to see each situation for what it is before investing in it. To assess, quickly and without drama, whether the conditions for genuine engagement are present, and when they are not, to participate at the appropriate level, to be pleasant, functional, present, to give what the situation can actually receive, and hold back what it cannot. Not bitterly, not with a sense of tragic loss, but with the quiet efficiency of someone who has learned to read terrain. This is not a counsel of coldness. It is a counsel of precision. The deep mind carries it home. Consider something honestly right now. In your own experience, the people who drain your energy most completely, who leave you feeling not tired, but somehow emptied, are they the people who challenge you? Or are they the people who refuse the challenge entirely? Write that in the comments below. Not to perform introspection, but because I suspect you have never quite articulated it that way before, and putting it into words has a way of changing things. Schopenhauer took his analysis one level deeper still, and this is where it becomes genuinely radical. He was one of the first serious thinkers to examine how stupidity scales, how it operates not just between individuals but across groups, institutions, and entire societies. His observation was precise. A person who operates at a relatively shallow level of reasoning may be manageable, even sometimes charming, in isolation. But the moment that shallowness finds reinforcement, the moment it locates others who share its certainties and its refusals, it transforms. It becomes something tribal, aggressive, and almost entirely impervious to outside influence. In a group, thinking dissolves. It is replaced by the much more efficient mechanism of mutual confirmation. People stop asking whether something is true and start asking whether their group believes it. The comfort of belonging, which Schopenhauer recognized as one of the most powerful forces in human psychology, overwhelms the discomfort of uncertainty. And because certainty feels like clarity, groups of mutually reinforcing shallow thinkers tend to project enormous confidence. They are loud. They are decisive. They move fast. They do not stop to examine their premises, which means they do not slow down. Meanwhile, the person who does stop, the person who pauses to consider whether the premise actually holds, whether the evidence actually supports the conclusion, whether the situation is more complex than the current framing allows, that person falls behind. They miss the moment when the group's energy crystallized into action. They raise a concern that is dismissed as overthinking. They are labeled, depending on the context, as difficult, negative, elitist, a wet blanket, someone who needs to trust the process. Schopenhauer saw this mechanism with perfect clarity from his position outside the mainstream. He watched Hegel, a philosopher he considered almost entirely hollow, a master of impressive-sounding obscurantism, command the attention of the entire European intellectual establishment. He watched simple, satisfying, emotionally resonant ideas crowd out complex, accurate, difficult ones. He watched the social machinery of ideas operate entirely independently of the actual quality of those ideas. And he concluded something that feels, if anything, more true today than it did in the 19th century. The majority is almost never wise. Not because individuals are incapable of wisdom, but because the social conditions under which majorities form and operate are precisely the conditions that wisdom requires you to resist. Groupness is the enemy of thought. The crowd rewards those who confirm and punishes those who complicate. This is not cynicism. Cynicism is just disappointment wearing a mask. This is diagnosis. And the difference matters enormously because a diagnosis, unlike cynicism, points toward a response. Let us talk about contempt, because this is the point in the journey where many intelligent people go wrong, and Schopenhauer was very clear about it. The person who has understood everything we have covered so far, who has recognized stupidity as a structural condition rather than a moral failing, who has seen how it scales in groups, who has felt the particular exhaustion of reason meeting unreasonableness, that person is now standing at a fork. And one path looks extremely attractive. The path is contempt. The conclusion that the people around you are simply lesser, not different, not limited, not human in the same fundamental way you are, but lesser. The development of a permanent inner distance that is not strategic, but reflexive. The slow hardening of frustration into disdain. Schopenhauer understood the seductive logic of this path. He had walked some distance down it himself. His private correspondence reveals a man who was not always gentle about the minds around him. But his philosophy, his considered, worked-out philosophical position, pushed firmly in the other direction. Because contempt, he recognized, is a form of imprisonment. When you hold someone in contempt, your emotional state becomes tethered to their behavior. Every foolish thing they do becomes a fresh offense. Every confirmation of your low opinion feels like a small wound rather than merely an observation. You cannot ignore them, because ignoring them would mean letting go of the contempt, and the contempt has become part of how you understand yourself.